So I just wanted to share my comments and criticisms about certain people, and I have nothing against these people in real life. I just seen a bunch of videos and I need to comment on them to really get to the heart of the matter on these issues. Hello kindred longevity lifestyle designers, this is Gavin here with secretsoflongevity.com. Despite my sarcastic intro, there will be no thinly veiled strain in my voice in this video, nor will I be suppressing an aggressive ideology in behind passive-aggressive demeanor aimed at garnering support for my stance. And I must actually commend this community for, despite their history of, in my opinion, having a very discourteous way of bringing about their feelings on these topics and ideas, in this case they are being much more rational and level-headed, even though I think the underlying reasons for their show or display of protest doesn't actually hold any weight. So I am in fact talking about the videos which are being shown and shared on social networking platforms with seeming fervor by people within the fruitarian or 80-10-10 community. And even it extends out to other aspects of raw foodism, raw veganism, but it seems to be mostly concentrated within the low-fat, high-raw vegan community. And while I'll be addressing these main points that they hold for being the reasons of their protests, and by the way, the protest is against certain leaders selling or being affiliated with products that have some sort of involvement with animals. So specifically, I believe the products that are mostly focusing on is elk antler, colostrum, and deer placenta. And these things are being sold alongside raw foods, raw superfoods, other herbs and supplements, and things of that nature on the sites of some of these raw food leaders. But first of all, I want to actually talk about the underlying ideologies and why I think the driving force behind these ideas and feelings that these people have that have pushed them to make these videos are not grounded in rationality or logical thinking. And if that isn't enough to dissuade someone from following and believing in their ideas, the points I mentioned after this chunk of explanation will surely do that. And if not, then you're choosing to downright ignore simple logic. And you could do that if you have a response and legitimate points to counter these points. But if you don't, and you're just pushing from an emotional stance because you just disagree with it on a fundamental level for no real reason other than belief system, that's your choice to do that, but you don't really hold any weight as having a public opinion on this, because we are talking in terms of rational discourse here, not religious belief systems. So one of the things I seem to see is that there's this idea that we can change the definition of the word raw. So there seems to be this idea that people feel like others who are selling these things are being disingenuous to raw food because they don't fit within their idea and paradigm of what raw food is, what the community, if we were to talk about this community, holistic health community, you know, we could talk about it in concentric rings. And the one hand you have this certain group of raw foodism. If you go out and encompass bigger and bigger definitions of what the ideal lifestyle is, it eventually gets out of the realm of raw food, because you're going to start including other people that have different ideas about consuming more cooked food or consuming some animal foods and all these other things, which, you know, changes the original idea of what these people believe in their more closed-knit group. So they're looking at people who are involved or were involved or market to people within the raw food community. And they seem to have a problem with something being sold that doesn't fit in their paradigm. So the mass public believes that the word raw means uncooked if we're talking about food. Now, the ideas that they seem to hold is that raw food means uncooked food that does not include any form of supplementation, superfood, herb, or even more than anything else, no animal products. Despite the fact that all around the world, many cultures have consumed raw animal products for countless generations, in varying forms, and they add the word raw in there because that's describing what state the food is in. It's not saying it's raw because it's a plant food, it's saying it's raw because it's uncooked. So regardless, there's a raw vegan community and they feel like they're being targeted with marketing that includes animal foods. Well, despite the fact that if you're the target of something you don't want, you can just ignore it. I'm targeted for marketing for bras when I walk down the street and there's something like that in a shop window, or I see some company that sells insurance I'm not interested in purchasing, or I see a car dealership that's selling a type of car I don't want to own. These are all things that are around me, they're in my community, and I don't have to feel insulted by the fact that they're around me and that other people I know might be interested in them. But if we fall back again to this idea of diet, we have to look at, once again, the fundamental belief systems that people are holding on to. Veganism, unlike most other areas of diet, is generally taken on as a lifestyle for reasons other than health. Health might be a part of it, but it's rarely the only factor that first gets someone involved in veganism, and it's rarely the one that has the most passion behind it. For me personally, when I was vegan and even vegetarian, I had my main driving force being health, my reasons for doing it, and over time, as I learned the science and other things on it, I've come to the conclusion, which I talk about extensively on my channel, that veganism is not the one and the only best thing for everyone, and it wasn't the best thing for me. So because I hold health to a higher degree of importance for my own well-being, rather than having a lifestyle that's completely devoid of all interactions with animals in the production of the things I use and consume, that led me to incorporate the animal foods without, that ideology from holding me back from what I've discovered is better for my health. I happen to have many vegan friends, both in real life and online, and I totally respect their choice to live that lifestyle. I have one friend in particular whom I know in my community who is vegan, and we've talked about reasons for being vegan and all matters of diet at some point, and I know that his reasons are founded in the fact that he expressly thinks that absolutely no involvement of animals should be in his diet, and he would be vegan even if it meant that he got sick and his body needed animal foods for whatever reason. So despite my conclusion that that is an unnatural drive, because he's saying that other life is more important than his own, so that negates the fundamental survival of the fittest drive that we all have. That's just my opinion, and that's a separate argument that we could get into in another video some other time. But I still respect him as a human, and I don't even judge him for that. I might think that it's incorrect, but there's tons of things people follow, believe, and might even be right about that I think differently on, and that doesn't mean that I have to hold him in a negative light in my mind. So this part of the video, like I said, was going to be more philosophical, and we're getting down to the root of the idea that you cannot project your values onto other people to the point where you're calling them out in a way that you perceive them as being the absolute epitome of what's wrong within your community. You absolutely have the right to do it, but I'm saying you can't from a standpoint of being about your health, with that being your motivation for this. If we're talking about belief systems, sure, you can do that. That happens in religious groups all the time. There's all these fingers pointing about my idea is more important than yours, and therefore you have to be kicked out of our church. You see all these offshoots of Christianity that came out of some larger group of Christianity, however dozens of hundreds of years ago. But those are beliefs. If we're talking about health, which is what the diet community online is about, the nutritional community, the lifestyle community, we're talking about health here. We're not talking about ideologies. Yes, you can bring those elements into it to support your ideas on any given topic, the environment and animal welfare, but it is not a driving force, especially when it comes to these things that people are speaking out against, because they have proven benefits, and if we can prove that with science, you have to attack those points of why they're beneficial, as opposed to trying to use these arguments that, they're involving animals, therefore we should not be consuming them in any way, shape, or form. And furthermore, that other people whom we see marketing or teaching are friends, if they're selling it, then we have to try and shun them? That doesn't really make much sense. So if herbs, superfoods, supplements, and even diet are tools, if we're arguing for or against something, we have to weigh up the pros and cons. And if we want to challenge people on it, we have to address those pros or those cons, or talk about why there are no pros and there's only cons, or whatever our perception is of that. We have to bring forward the proof of it. We cannot be using ad hominem attacks, which is wonderful to see that people are being much more civil in this case, which is something I do not see that often from this group whom I'm responding to. But there is still a lot of straw man arguments. There's the seemingly purposeful misinformation being spread without any research backing it up. and just these sort of blanket statements that don't really seem to come from any place that is legitimate. So I'll now be countering some of these blanket statements and other points. I'm obviously not going to be touching on every single point in the way that it was talked about by every single person, because there's a lot of videos out there, but I do see these as the major ones. So first and foremost is the idea that elk velvet antler or deer antler is causing harm to the animal, it's making the animal suffer, etc. This seems to be the core of the logical fallacy, which is the straw man argument that was presented in one of these videos, and that is the idea that you can take information, if we're talking about a product or supplement, from any company and apply it to another company. So it's showing pictures of deer having horns sawed off in a way that is very close to the head, and there might be other inhumane practices thrown in there that we could look at and think of as negative and undesirable for the animal. I would absolutely agree that any form of factory farming techniques where animals are mistreated is unnecessary. I don't see why there's so much emphasis being put on some of these people who are extremely ethical in what it is they're talking about and promoting stuff that is helping the planet so much in comparison to the real bad guys, the factory farms, the genetic modification, big agricorps, the pharmaceutical industries, all these other things that are causing so much more harm that really deserve our negative attention. Let's get the program straight and all work together on this. That was kind of the idea behind the one individual, Matt Monarch, who was saying, let's stop this internal fighting within, the alternative health community or holistic health communities, so that we can actually get to where we're trying to go, which is a more sustainable planet and all these other things. So back to the elk velvet antler, if we're talking specifically about Thrival's elk velvet antler, which is the one that's being addressed as being sold on various websites that are affiliated with or run by David Wolfe, Matt Monarch, and these other raw food leaders. So if we're talking about just that one product, that one is openly talked about online about how it's created. And if you've spent no time looking into that, then you need to be called on that lack of ability to do the proper research in order to make your points. That's what I mean by a straw man argument, taking the ideas of an industry and trying to project that unethical side of it onto another product that might be similar in what it's made from, but the manner in which it's made is drastically different. So what we know about Thrival's elk antler is that it's made from elk that are local to North America, specifically the US. This isn't Chinese, this isn't New Zealand, where there has been shown to be unethical practices. I won't even get into what goes on in those unethical practices, but it often involves drugs to suppress whatever trauma that our animal might go through. It involves tourniquets, things like that. In the contrast, the elk are on free-range wooded property. Yes, it's a fenced-in massive property, but that doesn't mean that the elk don't get amazing benefits from that. They, first of all, don't have to deal with predators hunting them because it's a set property that the farmer takes care of. And the farmer has the ability to walk right up to them in the field without any restraint on them at the precise time when they're about to drop the antlers anyways and shed all the velvet, remove or clip the tips of some of the antlers of the males that are in rutting season. So please describe to me how an animal would be suffering if the farmer has such a connection with the animal that he can go right up to it, do this thing to it. If there was any pain, if there's any resistance on the animal whatsoever, the animal could run away, the animal could literally probably kill the farmer just by turning around and stomping him and trampling him. And you throw these pictures up of bleeding antler stubs on deer that were probably harvested much too early in their season of producing the antlers, and it just doesn't hold weight. It's not a point that is relevant to the product you're criticizing people for promoting. So now let's talk about colostrum, the next point. There's criticism that, just like the elk antler, there's cruelty that goes on in the dairy industry, therefore all dairy industry must all work in exactly the same fashion, when once again, if we look at what's being talked about with these products, is that the program that the farmers have to adopt to begin collecting colostrum for this product actually ramps up the level of ethical practices that they're doing on our cattle. While it's redundant to go into extreme depth on every detail that goes into this program, Essentially, the farmer is upping the quality of life of the cows that are about to give birth than the calves after they're born. They're given better nutrition, there's strict standards for cleanliness and all these things that allows a farmer who's going to be collecting the milk anyways for whatever dairy industry he's involved in, whether it's raw dairy, whether it's dairy that's destined for pasteurization. It improves the level of what he's already doing and allows him to take the excess colostrum that his cows produce anyways from giving birth to creating the colostrum product. So no, there's no cows being denied colostrum. That's completely ridiculous to suggest that. It shows a lack of understanding of the dairy industry whatsoever, because anyone that knows the slightest thing about raising cows knows that if a calf goes without any colostrum whatsoever, it's going to be extremely sick very early on in its life and perhaps even die. So there's an abundance of this colostrum created, and the excess after the calf has had its fill is then collected. Has to come out anyway. It's not going to just sit there and be reabsorbed by the mother. And that's why we can then use this age-old, really powerful medicine for specific ailments and specific strategies that people want to implement it for. The whole discussion on the dairy industry in general is another topic that, once again, is extremely wide encompassing and goes beyond the scope of this video. But if you want to learn more about dairy and how it can be done in a way that's actually healthy and ethical, then check out this video here, which goes into more depth than most people are even slightly aware of about dairy, as opposed to this black and white view of that something is either all good or all bad. It's just simply not the way we can look at any industry or any type of food or any product. So the other point that was mentioned is that none of these things have been used for any great length of time within our human history. Once again, this is a point being made with absolutely no knowledge whatsoever on these things. It really starts to show the motivation behind the people who make these videos, because if they're getting the points completely wrong, then it shows that they're operating out of an ideology rather than a well-researched, knowledgeable stance. The first written use of elk or deer antler, it was mostly deer antler back in ancient times, was in the Shen Nong Ben Cao Jing, which was an ancient Chinese medicine text that outlined various herbs, both plant and animal as well as mineral, that could be used for various ailments, but also for their tonic effects that helps build and sustain life and increase your health. So that book was written pretty much 2,000 years ago at this point, and we know for a fact that it was used even further back than that, but we're just talking about, a concrete evidence here. That is when it was first being talked about in written form. So 2,000 years is not some irrelevant frame of time when you consider the diets of these people who are making these points isn't one that would even be possible at that time period, because all these hybridized fruits that have come about through more advanced farming practices has made that diet viable for them, and all the power to them. Go eat that way, but don't be a hypocrite and say that is something that is older and has a more well-researched tradition than what it is you're following, has no legitimacy when, look at the facts on timelines here. So just to highlight one point there is that sugary fruit, yes, it did exist going back, way back in time, but we're talking about, enough quantity and at all times of year so that it can be maintained as a staple food for the people who believe that that's the best way for them to be eating. Coincidentally, the first written account of colostrum being used medicinally was around the same time period, 2,000 years ago. It was, in this case, a Hebrew book called the Wisdom of Sirach, or more fully known as the Book of All Virtuous Wisdom of Joshua ben Sirach. And in the case with colostrum, we know that its history of use goes even further back than that for sure, because as soon as humans started, animal husbandry and gathering animals in herds, which extends further back than even the agricultural revolution, they would have been consuming the colostrum, the first milk of animals, if they're collecting the milk. They're just going to come across it and they're going to use it and they're going to see the benefits of it, the immunological properties, the extremely anti-inflammatory and growth-promoting properties that it contains. IGF-1, which is very abundant in both of these products, is somehow only detrimental, and that we should never consume it or have any of it in our body, because it, in this idea, promotes cancer. Once again, I want to keep this video condensed as much as possible, and even though it is going to be a long one, I thoroughly address those points in this video here. It covers all the bases on that argument, and I thoroughly deconstruct it powder it down to nothing and it blows away in the wind, and you no longer have to be burdened with that very self-defeating type of mentality that IGF-1 causes cancer if you have it in your body or that you're consuming it. And we really have to think of things all in moderation. There's many hormones and things in our body which we don't want to blast out to some ridiculous level. They can have side effects. It's about balance, and we don't want to suppress things either. You see that issue with all types of different bodily processes, that people start thinking in terms of black and white, like good and bad. Let's completely jack it out of there into this horrendously high level because that might be good, or we completely suppress it because it's been labeled as bad. That's really not how the body works. It's got everything it does for reasons, and we need to find the good medium for where those levels should be for our own health. So one other final point is that it's been said many times that these things are totally toxic and a complete scam. Well, if you're going to label something as totally toxic, you need to provide evidence for that. I've yet to see the science showing that these things are anything toxic. I've challenged people many times to address either of those two videos you saw up on the screen earlier for elk antler or colostrum and show me how this is toxic. It's not been done. It's a call to action. I need the feedback here, people. If I'm missing something crucial in the scientific literature, please do bring it up. And you can't call something a scam if it has a use. Yes, there's prices. And if you think the price is at a level which makes something a scam, you have to criticize and show why that thing is overpriced. There's a cost to creating a product. There's a cost to getting it out there, whether it's a basic food item or it's a tincture, an herbal tincture of some kind, whether it's colostrum, whether it's elk antler, whether it's nettle leaf extract in a powder. All these things are provided for us so we have the option to use it. So the price is reflective, usually if it's an ethical company, of the amount of work and cost that it takes them to produce it. And of course they're going to add something on there for some profit, because we live in a world where you need to make money to be able to grow your own business and to have a life that lets you live the way you want to live. So my underlying point here is, let's have some rationality. Let's have some degree of standards for what it is we're openly talking about and criticizing people for. Let's keep it civil, which is awesome that everyone is doing that. But the bombardment of spam and stuff, that's getting into the realm of not being very friendly, kind, compassionate, and respectful of other people and the things that they're putting out there. So furthermore, also take this to heart. Do you have such an investment in your ideas that even after watching this whole video and not having any points to counter the points that I brought up, other than belief systems, if you're still doing that and still pushing your ideas, there's nothing much else I can say except you're operating from a belief system. It's time you woke up to that. If you want to live it, live it. But acknowledge the fact that you're doing that and keep it to yourself. Just like we live in a secular society, and we've gotten to the point where we need to say, hey, all you religious people, your values are not to be projected on us. Keep those within your home. Do what it is you want, but you're not going to affect other people with your rhetoric and your ideas that are completely baseless in modern thinking and rational thinking. So I hope that has hit home. Let me know what you think in the comments below. There's also a sale on for elk antler. Yes, I had to go there. These types of criticisms give such good opportunities for these companies to, get the word out there for the wonderful products they're creating. 13% off until the end of Sunday for elk velvet antler at the links below. You can use the coupon code which you see on the screen here, all in caps, at checkout. Will get you those savings for any of the elk velvet antler products. If that's something you want to just try out to see what this talk is about, or it's something you have been using and you want to get this deal and are thankful for the wonderful criticisms that these people have brought up, because it puts their Thrival in a position where they can say, hey, let's give this discount so people can actually buy it, get some savings, if they're kind of skeptical of whether it works or not, and they can see for themselves if it has any value for their own health. So I'll talk to you next time. Take care and embrace life without limits.